I'm Liz Faublis, and this is Currents. The church in Mexico anticipates the Pope's arrival.
The Holy Father, he gives us the message of Jesus Christ, but this message is involved in the love of Lady of Guadalupe.
Plus, he was raised by the church, and he's telling his story.
My first 2 years I was in the Angel Guardian Home in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn, and then for the first 2 years. And then I was in a Convent of Mercy in Fort Greene for 4, 5, 6 years.
And another feast in the month of March as a Queens parish celebrates St. Joseph.
We are celebrating the Feast of St. Joseph involving the Italian communities from this part of Queens.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. In less than 4 days, Pope Benedict will head to Latin America. The Pope will board a plane in Rome from Mexico, his first destination. It's part of a trip that will also see Benedict making a highly anticipated visit to Cuba. NET will be bringing you extensive coverage of the Pope's travels in both countries. Currents is in Mexico, and we had a chance to sit down with the rector of the Basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe in Mexico City, Monsignor Pedro Agustin Lara.
We are very happy because Benedicto XVI come to us. And in Mexico, the Cardinal Norberto Rivera said us that we have three loves: Jesus Christ, the Virgin of Guadalupe, and the Pope. We have hope in Our Lady of Guadalupe because she brings us to Jesus Christ. And for this reason, it's very important the presence or Benedict XVI in our land, because he don't come all the Mexicans. He comes from all America, Latin America, and North America too, and for all the world. He came to the house of Guadalupe, to the country of Guadalupe, to the continent of Guadalupe. It's very important to recognize that the last 12th of December, the Pope Benedict XVI in Rome celebrated the Mass for the Virgin of Guadalupe. He prepares his presence with Our Lady of Guadalupe. The Holy Father, he gives us the message of Jesus Christ, but this message is involved in the love of Lady of Guadalupe. There are many different expectations. Some persons, they think this is a politician's act. He came because very near we have a need elections. No, they are very wrong. No, this is not the sense of the visit of a Pope. Other persons are very emotive and say, I like see the Pope. I like to stay in the first place. But by the emotion, they don't will hear the voice. The more important is that we receive him with our hearts very open, with the eyes very open, with a very hard, living heart, no? Because he gives us to Jesus Christ. He gives us the hope, the speciality, the hope that gives us the salvation, the liberation, that do it freedom, but the really freedom. I'm sure that he will say it's necessary that we take the way of the new evangelization. It's necessary that we study and do to the deep of the faith. And he says we need live our faith like a missionary and with the sanctity. the crisis times, for some persons, are times confused, very confused. But in the middle of the confusion, in the middle of the darks, the light, bright, better. And these times will bring to all humanity and to Mexico and to all America many testimonies of sanctities, of the holiness,
And breaking news today out of Mexico, a magnitude 7.4 earthquake struck in the country's southern resort towns. According to one account, residents were feeling aftershocks more than an hour after the quake hit. Meanwhile, ahead of the Pope's arrival in Cuba next Monday, members of the dissident group, the Ladies in White, were released from jail. The group, comprised of wives and other female relatives of jailed Cuban dissidents, was arrested over the weekend in Havana. Stay tuned, there's more currents ahead. Pope Benedict fills some high-profile bishops' vacancies. We'll have that and the rest of the day's headlines next. Welcome back to Currents. I'm Liz Faublas. Coming up later in the show, just a couple of days after St. Patrick's Day, we celebrate another saint. First, let's have a look at the day's headlines. It was one of the most well-publicized vacancies in the American church. Not anymore. Today, Pope Benedict tapped Bishop William Lori to be the next Archbishop of Baltimore. Lori served as the Bishop of Bridgeport since 2001, and he chairs the bishop's ad hoc committee for religious liberty. I should also note his efforts at voicing the U.S. bishop's opposition to the Health and Human Services contraception mandate has him in the news quite a bit lately. Lori will succeed Cardinal Edwin O'Brien in Baltimore. Pope Benedict named Cardinal O'Brien the new head of the Knights of the Holy Sepulchre last year. Meanwhile, the Pope filled 3 other bishops' vacancies today. He selected Monsignor David Malloy of the Archdiocese of Milwaukee as the new bishop of Rockford, Illinois. Benedict chose Father Gregory Parks of the Diocese of Orlando as the new bishop of Pensacola, Tallahassee. And from the church in Canada, the Pope selected Montreal Auxiliary Bishop Christian Lépine as the Metropolitan Archbishop of Montreal. Now, the Vatican has released a report on abuse in the Irish Church. The report stems from the apostolic visitation of Catholic institutions in Ireland. The Vatican initiated the course of action last year. According to Rome Reports, the findings emphasize the anger and betrayal the Pope feels over the acts of abuse committed at Irish Catholic institutions. And in Ireland today, the church published a 7-page summary of the report. Cardinal Sean Brady, Archbishop Diarmaid Martin, and Apostolic Nuncio to Ireland, Archbishop Charles Brown, addressed the media.
We mustn't lose heart. We must put our trust in the mercy and forgiveness of God, and that's why I want to repeat again my plea for forgiveness from those who have been abused, and I apologize and offer my deep sorrow.
My sense is that the Holy Father himself has exhibited that for us, an absence of arrogance and a disarming humility in his approach to these terrible crimes and sins.
According to the report, the Irish Church is following guidelines to protect children, but needs to emphasize the issue more in seminaries. The Diocese of Helena, Montana, agreed to use a mediator to settle claims of sexual abuse at the hands of priests and nuns. According to the Great Falls Tribune, attorneys for the diocese and plaintiffs have asked the judge to halt court proceedings. Now, the two sides will reportedly meet next month to interview each alleged victim. In what is being called an unprecedented move, the Helena Diocese has pledged to open its financial records and share files on accused priests with plaintiffs' attorneys. In 2 lawsuits against the Helena Diocese, around 250 people are claiming to have been abused as children. Church officials are condemning a deadly attack at a Jewish school in Toulouse, France. A manhunt is underway for the gunman who shot and killed 3 children and a teacher at the school on Monday. Vatican spokesman Father Federico Lombardi called the attack ignoble and shameful. Meanwhile, the Archbishop of Toulouse called the shooting horrific and expressed his profound sympathy. Police say the weapon used in the shooting was also used last week in attacks on soldiers of African descent in France. Coptic Christians in Egypt said their final goodbyes to their leader. Coptic Patriarch Pope Shenouda III was laid to rest in Cairo today. Shenouda led the Coptic Orthodox Church since 1971. He enjoyed warm relations with other churches. In 1973, he met with Pope Paul VI, signing a joint declaration stating the Catholics and Coptics commonly held beliefs about Jesus. Shenouda was reportedly in poor health for many years. He died on Saturday after struggling with diabetes. And a member of the Jordanian royal family wants Arab Christians to stay put. At a summit in Amman, Jordan, Prince Hassan bin Talal said that Arab Christians are pioneers of thought and the Arab revival. Bishops, religious and scholars, along with Christians and Muslims from across the Arab world, took part in the summit. Among the final recommendations, the drafting of a social charter to guarantee equal rights for minorities in Arab nations. Elsewhere, a Vatican official says Christians leaving the Middle East would be a tragedy. Cardinal Jean-Louis Tauran heads the Pontifical Council for Interreligious Dialogue. Tauran says Muslims and Christians need to avoid a clash of ignorance. The cardinal says more of the problems between the two groups come from misinterpretation or misunderstanding of the other side. Finally, the head of the Catholic Church in England is paying tribute to the outgoing leader of the Anglican Communion. Westminster Archbishop Vincent Nichols says he has grown to appreciate Rowan Williams' fine qualities. Nichols went on to cite Williams' kindness, sharp intellect, dedication to harmony between peoples, as well as his courage and friendship. Rowan Williams announced last week that he would step down as the Archbishop of Canterbury at the end of the year. Stay tuned, there's more currents ahead. Coming up from another time, a look inside a Catholic orphanage from someone who experienced it firsthand.
Even though I was traumatized, even though it impacted my life for the rest of my life, that as a system, they did the best they could under the circumstances and the resources.
Welcome back. Well, imagine being abandoned by a young unwed mother and being forced to grow up in the Catholic orphanage system in Brooklyn under the strict care of the Sisters of Mercy. Imagine also that in the midst of this life, being moved from one orphanage to another, living among out-of-wedlock infants, children whose fathers had been killed in the war, and children of parents in crisis. On top of all of that, dealing with sexual abuse. Well, this is one man's true story, as told in the book Raised by the Church, Growing Up in New York's Catholic Orphanages. It's the life of Ed Rose. Now, part of the reason he tells his story, for more than 2 decades, the Catholic Church has grappled with a series of clergy sexual abuse scandals and lawsuits. I sat down with Ed Rose earlier today. Rose, who now works for the New York State Office of Mental Health, talked with me about his nearly 2 decades-long experience that defined his identity and forced him to come to terms with the importance of overcoming your biggest fears. So, Ed, here we are. You're left by your mother, who was unwed at the time. You're being raised by the Sisters of Mercy now at an orphanage. Your parents never came back, nor did they relinquish any of their parental rights. So you couldn't even be adopted. How long were you in the system?
I was in the system for 19 years. In fact, for the first part of my 13 years, I thought I was a complete orphan. I didn't know I had parents. In fact, I thought I actually went from the hospital to the orphanage. And then doing the research for the Raised by the Church, which is very treacherous, was that I found out through the archives that my parents couldn't afford an abortion. They wanted an abortion, couldn't afford it. And so they dropped me off at a maternal aunt for 6 months in a rooming house in Greenpoint, Brooklyn. When that maternal aunt could no longer take care of me because there was no financial assistance, she said to my mother, "You got to pick me up. Got to get him out of here. I'm going to be thrown out." And that's when I started my journey at the Angel Guardian Home in Brooklyn.
And what was it like being raised by the brothers and the sisters? Because you aged out of a few orphanages. You weren't in just one orphanage your entire 19 years.
I was in 5 of them because the way the boys worked, they moved you based on your age and your grade. And so what happened was my first 2 years I was in the Angel Guardian Home in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. And then for the first 2 years. And then I was in a Convent of Mercy in Fort Greene for 4, 5, 6 years. And then I aged out of that place and went to St. Mary's of the Angels Home in Syosset with the Sisters of Mercy. In that place, the orphanages, we had between 24 and 72 boys in one dormitory with 2 nuns taking care of up to 72 boys in one room. And then from there I aged out, and for the first time in my life had the Meredith brothers in St. John's Home in Rockaway, Queens. And in St. John's Home, the brothers were fantastic too, just like the nuns. We had up to 38 boys in one dormitory for 4 years. And we only took baths 2 or 3 days a week. And then from St. John's Home in Rockaway, the last journey was to St. Vincent's Home in downtown Brooklyn, which was in the heart of the Civic Center.
Mm-hmm. And you speak that there were the nuns and the brothers that were good to you, that some of the experiences were not as bad, but there were some painful experiences that actually reshaped your life. Can you talk a little bit about that?
There was 2, I call them isolated incidents, and that is when I was in St. Mary's of the Angels Home. The sisters were so overwhelmed in taking care of us, our basic needs in the dormitories, in school, religion, etc. They entrusted our care into this lay person, who I call in the book Kevin the Monster. And Kevin took care of us in the playground, and in the playroom and the playgrounds. And his form of discipline was to hang us up by rafters when we misbehaved. And when you fell down from the rafter, you got smacked and you got spanked. And then he would pick you up on the rafters again and hang you up until you fell down with pain. And then he also used to make us pull our pants down below our knees and face a corner. There was no contact, but it was a form of discipline to make us line up and face the wall and drop our shorts and pants and just punish us, making us face the wall.
Mm-hmm. And the other incident?
And the other incident was in St. John's Home in Rockaway when I was about 13 years of age. The Meredith brothers that worked there all year round were superb, were out of this world. Trusting, caring, sensitive, you name it. But in the summertime, they needed help. So they had these visiting brothers that come from all over the country to help them out. They came from the University of Dayton. They would come from Chaminade High School in Long Island to help out. Mm-hmm. And this one brother, religious brother, entrusted me. And he sexually would come to my bed at night and sexually attacked me.
And obviously a very profound
Very
impact on your life. Why tell this story now?
Because I realize now, after so many years, that overall, the religious did an outstanding and incredible job. And I felt you can't sugarcoat anything, because in any kind of system, you can have rough spots. And I felt to let people know that even though these incidents occurred, even though I was traumatized, even though it impacted my life for the rest of my life, that as a system, they did the best they could under the circumstances and the resources. Mm-hmm. They had limited financial resources. They did it strictly for the dedication, for their mission to God, to do God's work. Mm-hmm. And that's why I really respect now more than ever to take care of 140 boys in one institution, one after another, and give us good basic care. Mm-hmm. Food, clothing, shelter, and safety.
Do you participate in the process now?
It's fascinating you said that, because when I left at 19 years of age, I was discharged from my last place, and I was petrified, because of the large numbers. They didn't have the staff resources to give individual attention to ADL skills, living skills, money management, food shopping, etc. So I was out. They gave me a furnished room and a part-time job. And so for the first couple of years, I was just running the streets trying to find myself. Mm-hmm. I felt I had no support. Although the support was there, I was stubborn, determined to make it on my own. And with the grace of God, I think with him behind me, I would probably make it. It would take a little rough spots, but I would do it. Mm-hmm. And then what happened was, lo and behold, I got back into the field to help other kids, adolescents, that went through the same thing I went through. And I found my journey coming back into the system and helping children, family, and abandoned children and others.
What I like about the book is right at the very beginning, you highlight 10 beliefs that my understanding has helped define your life right now. Can you talk a little bit, maybe just one or two of the ones that you truly follow that really help ground you?
The most important one I believe in is believing in yourself, regardless of what anybody else believes in. If you believe in yourself, it's more important and have the perseverance and the discipline to keep raising the bar for yourself. I believe in that. Keep raising the bar for yourself, to never be satisfied. That you have we all have so much potential. We all have abilities, but we have to push ourselves. In addition to getting the normal education and the support, I believe those 10 beliefs, those are my 10, I call them my Bibles in many, many ways, because that's what got me through life in general. I believe in loyalty. I believe in competency. Those are my beliefs that I think if people that are listening,
Yes.
young and old, regardless of a socioeconomic level. This book, by the way, is for every socioeconomic, not just the poor, the middle class, the rich, because everybody can learn from this experience.
And it's a good story.
And it's a good story, yes.
Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your story.
Thank you very
Ed.
much.
And stay tuned, there's more Currents ahead. When we return, a celebration of St. Joseph at a parish in Queens.
St. Joseph was the protector of Jesus and Mary and the anchor, so to speak, of the Holy Family. Italian people resonate to that.
And finally tonight, St. Patrick's Day may get all the attention in March, but it's not the only feast day we celebrate during the month. March 19th is the Feast of St. Joseph, a celebration close to the hearts of Italians around the world. And one place they know how to celebrate, Our Lady of Miraculous Medal Church in Ridgewood, Queens. On Sunday, they gathered for a mass and procession steeped in tradition.
Intercede per noi San Giuseppe, uomo di fede e maestro di vita, insieme alla tua sposa, la Vergine Maria. Amen. Che viva San Giuseppe!
We are celebrating the Feast of St. Joseph involving the Italian communities from this part of Queens. There are many different Italian clubs or societies that are dedicated to various saints, but St. Joseph is the patron of the Universal Church.
Most of the people here are nearly all Italian, and particularly they would be Sicilian. This is a very localized celebration in the sense that the tradition that we're observing is a Sicilian tradition, with the foods and the band and all that. Allora, nella tradizione siciliana, lo sposo di Maria, il padre putativo di Gesù, San Giuseppe, è onorato come protettore dei poveri, il padre dell'ospitalità. St. Joseph is the patron saint of hospitality in the Sicilian tradition, and that's what I'm most familiar with, because for years we've had a very large Sicilian congregation, and we did all these, carried on all these activities according to the usage in Sicily.
St. Joseph was the protector of Jesus and Mary and the anchor, so to speak, of the Holy Family. Italian people resonate to that. Many of them came here as immigrants, of course, and felt strange in a new land, and they came hoping that their Joseph father would guide and protect them as they got acclimated to life in a new land.
The procession is to bring the statue in the streets of Ridgewood, to let other nationality know our roots and how valuable being Italian American. You could be also Polish and American, Irish and American, but at the same time we are celebrating this event with the rest of international community of Ridgewood.
St. Joseph is a real force in my life. I rely on him for a lot. I pray to him every day, and he's granted me wonderful graces.
It's a very, very important saint. It's everything for us.
These traditions can get lost if we fail to teach our children. In that case, then they will get lost.
We've been doing this for almost 40 years now, but as you can see, there aren't that many young people here. But the tradition is still alive. Keeping the tradition alive is important in terms of their affiliation with the church. So I'm glad that we're able to share with them in this particular celebration here at Miraculous Medal.
And the Feast of St. Joseph was also a significant day for Pope Benedict. It is the feast of his namesake, the Pope whose given name is Joseph Ratzinger, thanked those who have been praying for him ahead of the feast. The Pope also took time to talk on the phone with Italian Prime Minister Mario Monti, whose birthday falls on the feast of St. Joseph. Well, that is all for this edition of Currents. Coming up tomorrow, she was an up-and-coming actress who once starred with Elvis, but eventually answered a much different calling. We caught up with her this past weekend. Until then, be sure to visit us online at currentsny.net. And for all of us here at Currents, I'm Liz Faublas. Thank you for joining us and have a good night.